Good evening, readers and listeners, today for this important occasion of looking at the problems in higher education institutions around the world, especially in developing countries. I am Professor Patrick Oseloka EZEPUE, and I have been fortunate just today and previous days to talk at length with Professor Ifeyinwa Eucharia ACHUMBA, Professor of Computer Engineering at the renowned Federal University of Technology Owerri, Nigeria, who is looking at a topic entitled From Problems to Product, Translating Society Ills to Economic or Research Outputs. This topic is extremely relevant for reimagining higher education generally, especially from the perspective of impact in society, excellence and impact. In the discussions I had with Professor Ifeyinwa, it was clear to us that there are solutions anyway to the problem of acute lack of impact in traditional academia, especially as manifests in developing countries. I would like to give my own take on this, which actually was in consonance with the ideas that Professor Ifeyinwa was actually, releasing. It was extremely pleasing to see a professor who is clued on about the potential solutions to the malaises in African higher educational institutions. I would like to be thematic about it by looking at what does it mean to talk about problems in these societies like Nigeria, Africa, and developing countries of the global south. In mentioning the concept of products, I think that the conveners of the event that Professor Ifeyinwa is actually going to speak to are looking at the fact that there seems to be a very vague translation of research results, teaching results, integration of knowledge and application results in higher educational institutions in Nigeria and developing countries to products. And by products, I think they mean services, solutions that citizens and clients and organizations need to problems that challenge them every day in the way they run their organizations, in the way they live their lives. So you talk about product, you talk about service, you talk about creating opportunities like jobs, wealth, digital firms, hybrid firms, covering for-profit, not-for-profit social enterprises, and that spectrum generally, supporting sole traders, supporting micro and medium-scale enterprises, the so-called MSMEs. But when you look at the idea of transforming societal ills to economic or research outputs, I think my mind is telling me here that we need to look at how these ills, society is actually emanate. It seems to me that they emanate from almost a sense of nonchalance on the part of academics in leading a revolution that is sorely needed to anchor everything we do in research, in teaching, in integration of knowledge, applications. Exactly in the order I want it anyway: research first, integration of knowledge, applications, and teaching. Riot, we normally call it the riot ensemble in corporate academicism. Of course, a concept I mean that every serious work in these four domains must lead to something that society benefits from. Academics may argue that, okay, students benefit. How do they benefit? Do they benefit by listening to a professor that stands in the class 40 minutes out of 60 minutes lecture? Simply advertising themselves literally without thinking, is it fair for me to front load 40 minutes of teaching within a 60 minutes, lecture? Where is the time for the student to learn practice? Nothing. So the lecturer is simply regurgitating notes that the lecturer already has over the years, sometimes not even improved. No new case studies, no new practices brought in. And then, of course, immediately he finishes, he dashes off. And the students are left thinking, what are we going to do to be able to apply this knowledge? So there's something wrong. Okay. Of course, it doesn't mean that every societal ill is emanating from the educational system. But you can imagine when such a number, a dominant percentage of citizens in a country that are actually schooling right from secondary schools, primary schools, secondary schools, pre-tertiary to tertiary, are left with asking. That leads to serious problems on youth and graduate unemployment downstream. So in looking at that, we now ask ourselves, what is the situation currently? The current situation, which I regard to as traditional academia, is heavily distorted in terms of the requirements, for instance, for excellence, for impact, for promotions. It doesn't incentivize academics to really work towards producing value. It rather incentivizes them to write papers to be promoted. Of course, they think strategically that if they get promoted, which is the fact, they earn more money. If you move from senior lecturer to professor, it's a big enhancement in your earnings. But the point is, why is it that all these academics don't produce much? That's the problem. Okay? That's exactly because they have not been incentivized to think creatively about the structures that can enable them to produce a lot of value, to be able to create those affordances that I mentioned, those affordances that are actually accommodated in what we formulated as the Oselux vision. And that vision is simple: to live a spirit-filled life, project-based life, transforming and democratizing global education and change. What change? The kind of changes we're talking about now. Upscaling global citizens by creating products, services, jobs, wealth, and enhancing the happiness, prosperity, and joy of individuals, organizations across academia, industry sectors, public services, and wider society, communities, for instance. And publishing the results innovatively in a way that it percolates right through society, right through these 4 main areas that I've mentioned now, which is we fondly call the quadruple helix: academia, public services, industry sectors, and wider society. If we take a typical university in Nigeria, for instance, placed in a capital city like Nnamdi Azikiwe University, for instance, in the Awka metropolis, the capital of Anambra State, what is the impact of that university in Awka as a community, as a town? For all these decades that the university has been in existence, I don't think it's significant. The same is the story, Federal University of Technology Owerri, again situated in Owerri, the capital of Imo State. What's the impact? It's almost as if that university is disconnected from that particular society. Yet the professors and academics in that university are publishing. And this is the same story at UI, University of Nigeria, Ahmadu Bello University, University of Ife. Academics are actually living the life of isolated elites, more or less, publishing papers that only themselves read, rating themselves high or low, depending on criteria that are heavily useless as far as I'm concerned. And I just, earlier today, released an article in LinkedIn where I said, and I mean it, that academics are playing what I call the game of creative falsehood. Because when you are, pretending to be busy, writing things that are not translating to anything meaningful in society, your country is underdeveloped for almost 60-something years of independence. Same with other sub-African countries. Same with many countries in the developing countries of the global south. Then what kind of scholarship is that? When if you change the model, you can still continue to be productive, but in the academic sense, but also have a much heavier impact in society in order to mitigate those ills. So it comes down to the idea of, what do we need to do? We need to move to a new model. And that model is about enabling academics, students, professionals, graduates to always work in a way in which the knowledge that is being researched, the knowledge that is being produced, is talking to the realities of the production of goods and services, and all these other affordances are mentioned in the Oselux dream. How can that happen? Many of them don't even have even the so-called departmental consulting units, research and consulting units. Some that do are simply managed by the so-called top professors who manage to bring 1 or 2 grants here and there. When the money comes, they manage it individually. They release the report back to the funders. It has never been involving students enough. So at the end of the day, what is going on? The academic continues to succeed in their own self-defined ways. The student is cut off from the flow of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship that is required to be the case in these environments. So who is fooling who? A system that completely structures promotions and other pathways for career progress in a way that somebody can actually decide to be absent from class for about 6 months and generate enough papers to be a professor. But that person has not enough cognate knowledge of other disciplines, cannot marshal multidisciplinary solutions to problems, is renowned in that particular technically limiting way, but completely absent from the scene when it comes to solving national, continental, and globally challenging problems. This is serious enough because if you take the level of graduates and youth unemployment in a country like Nigeria, it is clear that that country is sitting on a time bomb. Generations of students that are completely without skills have been graduated. All they have to show is a paper called a degree certificate. So there is a problem here. In looking at how do we then transform the system, we believe that the current pedagogical system is wrong. A system, as I said before, when the T is put before the R, I, and A, which means trier, is completely obsolete because there's not enough room given within a lecture engagement for students to dabble with practice, look at how knowledge is connected, which is I of K, the most important principle in pedagogy today, the combination of knowledge. These students take electives, actually, major, minor. When do they have the opportunity to bring the concepts together in solving a real-life problem? So we posit a new system, a system that has to install in every department, in every university, in every polytechnic in the country, what we call centers for the application of every discipline, C for X. Take, for example, in statistics, you can call it something else, center for the application of statistical sciences. In this center, every module that is taught is run as practice, as a set of practices, as the concepts of the module are actually used in solving real-life problems from across the helix, from academia itself, from public services, from industry sectors, and from wider society. It is in these guys that these academics can have impact, even in the immediate community where the university or the polytechnic is located. This is not happening. And what is even worrisome is that most of the departments are top-heavy. In other words, people have money to game the system, write that number of papers required, put it in whatever journals they call Scopus, this and that. It's a completely useless criteria as far as I'm concerned. Because what is going on is that standards are imposed from somewhere, while the people that are trying to meet the standards are not solving problems. The beauty of the paper, the number of references, the academic language is what makes the paper to be accepted. So this is extremely wrong, as I said before. So the next thing we need to look at, therefore, is what constitutes an effective solution schema for this problem. And that schema, as I say, is to restructure the pedagogical styles that are used, to put the T behind the R, I, and A, to give riot in that order. Meaning, at the beginning of a lecture, somebody comes in, just 5 minutes, 6 minutes, introduces the concepts and learning outcomes for that particular engagement or lecture. And then, having already preloaded with the students on the online system with research papers, for instance, that talk to the concepts. Most of them can be his own because he's a very creative guy who can actually, if those papers, if there are not enough papers in the system, which is likely to be because most of the academies don't solve problems, he creates those papers himself, writes them, okay? And then also develops a concept that, a set of exercises that will force them to interplay concepts from different disciplines, integration of knowledge, and ideas from industry, for instance, ideas from around the cure helix. Positions case studies that can give sufficient practice of those concepts and allows the students to play with it. In other words, he no longer stands in the face of students for too long. He's no longer the sage on the stage, but the guide by the side. When the students have interacted enough with all this, asking questions, debating ideas, close to the remaining 12 to 10 minutes of plenary, the same lecturer can come now and do the big teaching, pulling everything together. By then, the knowledge has been elicited from the capacities of the students themselves. Call it student-led, that's fine. Call it problem-based, okay. But it's much deeper than that. Because currently in up to 90% of universities in the world, there are what we know as 5 teaching formats that dominate. The question and answer, the lecture by the lecturer, which I say takes too much time, doesn't give enough room for practice and understanding of, real world problem solving. And then, of course, paired group, a little bit of individual exercise, try this or something like that. Tutorial that comes in the evening where he's not even there as an academic, maybe his PhD student or his master student is trying to work with the students. The academic has completely vanished to go and write his papers, the same papers that don't have impact. So that is not it. But the new system where you package the R first, the I, A, and leave them to work on it, enables you as an academic to pull their own experiences together. You then re-emphasize the value of the concepts introduced in the small T at the beginning, and the system is more of really triad. Very small T at the beginning, big R, big I, big A, big T at the end. That is what we need. And we are doing this with a lot of problem solving in the C4S, in those centers. Classrooms must look like those centers themselves. And they still go to the centers because in the centers, academics are coming in, professionals are coming in, graduates are coming in, clients are coming in to work together with the knowledge workers in order to produce solutions to problems that require the orchestration of the concepts of a discipline. This is important. So, in summary, this concept of reversing the pedagogical process is called reverse pedagogy. It's very innovative because whereas there are those 5 teaching formats that not only people use in traditional education, in this corporate academic game, there are about more than 15 riot strategies that can be enacted So to have up to 10 more approaches than what is used tells you the power of the system we're talking about. In that system, you have accelerated learning for the, that can enable students to actually learn from multiple intelligences, so that when you're positioning a course of study, you are bringing in opportunities for these multiple intelligence to be happening. You can look at Gardner, 2005 or 2008, and all those kind of references for the theory of multiple intelligence. Of course, you can also look at creative dialogue, which is not even mentioned, which is exactly a way of teaching people so that they can suspend judgment and listen properly and not always be dogmatic about their own understandings, and learn to know whether they can pull in other ideas in order to enrich what they have already. You also have something like, the way of the warrior, training serious academic, serious problem solvers through the same process almost that is used in training elite military personnel. Using also what is called delivery practice, the system that is used to train elite sportsmen, the tennis players of the world, even the musicians, the creatives, the Mozarts of the world, to use that system to train experts that come from the higher educational systems, who can now handle problems better than those that are relying on the 5 formats. So that is exactly where we are. This is what needs to happen. That is currently not happening. Okay? Now, we don't have enough space to be able to do justice to this topic, but I am trying to kind of organize it in a way that you will know what is lacking and what needs to happen. Okay, how do you reconsider the priorities of the professorate? This is exactly the expression used by Ernest L. Boyer in 1970 in his book, Scholarship Reconsidered, Priorities of the Professorate. If you promote academics on the basis of mainly the research papers that don't actually talk to realities of problem solving, don't create products, don't create enterprises, don't create solutions to cogent problems in society, including the 2030 United Nations Strategic Development Goals, how are you going to be loading up the promotion of a professor to take almost 70% of the scoring? You are telling the professor actually that it's not needed to teach students. That's exactly what you're saying. This is extremely wrong. Because nobody says that the guy who can do the good teaching cannot also write papers, cannot also do research. And this is the problem. You give senior academics opportunity to avoid teaching students, literally. That's what you're doing. This is why such countries can never, ever be developed if the system is not completely restructured, re-architected, totally. And I'm thinking, doing that right from primary school. This is why today in Oselux, the Oselux Global Education and Analytics, we have platforms for teaching secondary schools digital students, so that we can use reverse pedagogy to train them. So by the time they join the universities that we are also establishing, they will actually be using systems that are already used to. Because if you don't do this from the ground up, yes, you can fix it right from first year, final year, master's up to doctorates, but it's even better you start bringing in some of the elements earlier. And that's exactly what we are doing today in the Oselux systems. We may be new, but what is coming on is a revolution. Because even degrees and certificates become worthless in the next 10 years. What is important is skills. So that badge of honor will become irrelevant as far as we are concerned. We need to think about what needs to happen for countries like Nigeria, countries in the sub-Saharan Africa, developing countries of the global south, to actually move their countries forward, to develop. Because the truth is that nobody stops a country from developing. I see a lot of arguments about geopolitics. Does the United States tell Nigeria not to reorganize itself? No, they rather help. Does Britain tell South Africa, for instance, not to improve itself, their situation, or Kenya? They don't. They rather give aids. It is you, as the people in that country, that we say, you know what, we inherited a system we need to change. And we must do that in a way that is teleological, that still uses opportunities to work with the world, not to run away from the world, to collaborate across the globe in those 4 areas, in academia, in public services, in industry sectors, and wider society, community projects, and things like that. Universities will actually impact the societies they belong to, and vice versa. Opportunities are created across the board, within classroom, outside the classroom. But it cannot happen if the academics are mostly pigeonholed in the classes, writing papers to be promoted. And the honest truth is that if a traditional academic can write 4 papers in a year, a corporate academic that has more experience and a lot of projects done can write 20. So who is fooling who? Because even the paper that is written by the corporate academic is far more substantial, to be honest, and ticks every single box. By the way, the system that we are now using to publish academic papers in AfriWorld Publishing, which we just established, has 7 criteria of excellence compared to the typical 3 that you find in traditional journals. You can see the difference. Massive difference. Okay? However, the publishing firms and the so-called leading institution will be pretending that what is material is putting it in one journal or the other that is corpus rated. I don't even understand those criteria. I told Springer when they surveyed me, that I don't use any of the criteria, because the criteria has not helped any developing country for all these years. So why are we? As a matter of fact, Elsevier and others now are being blamed for charging atrocious prices just to accept somebody's paper. Somebody's sweat. At the end of the day, the person may come back to want to download his paper 2 years' time. He's told to pay about $50, for instance. I'm not saying Elsevier, just a simple example, right? I don't want to be too picky in this view. But we all know that legacy publishing companies are extracting disproportionate profit from the labor of academics around the world. I wonder even why academics have not revolted, because this is like, people through what I can call head mentality, submitting themselves to slavery. I'll never ever publish in those journals, because my own journals are better. It's not even more difficult to publish in, and that is the truth. So the re-architecting must happen across the board, not only in knowledge production through the institution of the C4X, but also in the publishing scheme. Now let's talk about how you promote a professor that is in accordance with what I'm talking about. You have to go back to the riot. Instead of saying, oh, a professor needs 80% or 70% in research, forget about it. 100% in the 4 areas, 100% in research, you score him. 100% in integration of knowledge, which most of them don't even know. Some of them will score 10 there anyway. Because a professor of marketing will be talking about marketing and digital marketing and all those entrepreneurship. He has not even got one company. He has not even got a company registered for Nigeria, maybe Corporate Affairs Commission on UK here. Companies have. But they are standing and talking as if he has seen it all. You can never see it all if you don't practice. That's why every discipline must be taught as practices. It does not deny the theoretical depth, because even that depth is even deeper. All right? So you score them 100 in R, I, A, and T, and you take an average. Simple. That is the model we are using in the university we are constructing today. Okay? So that each professor now knows that, no, I have to improve my teaching. I have to improve my ability to integrate knowledge. In the teaching, you are scored on the capacity to understand and use reverse pedagogy, which is the most dominant paradigm coming up now in teaching and learning. If you don't know that, forget about it. Because you can even publish papers about how you apply reverse pedagogy in your own discipline, whether it's computer engineering, whether it's statistics, whether it's mathematics. How many mathematicians actually prepare to go and teach mathematical topics by arranging the R, I, and T in that order? Find the research that talks to the concepts, integration of knowledge that brings knowledge together and solves real problems, applications that actually get them hands-on doing problem solving with mathematical concepts, as well as the teaching of how those things concatenate, how they work together seamlessly. How many of them do that? But yet we have a terrific number of professors of mathematics in Nigeria. My disdain for traditional academia comes from this inability for such a heavy workforce in a country to impact the country. And that is exactly clear to see. All right? We need to change this game once and for all. So I believe that we really, truly need to anchor reverse pedagogy, centers for application of disciplines, in which even the rating and ranking of academics must tick 100% of each of these four things and have been taken very simple and is very difficult to game. Because now the authors can no longer go and start manufacturing papers at the expense of their teaching. No, everything counts. And when you see a global corporate academic talk, you see the depth of understanding they push. They're almost like, what we call the rainmakers, masters of the universe, the investment backers of Goldman Sachs, and you know what I mean, Barclay Capital, but in academia as well. So they're playing the two games properly. They're playing the inside and outside game expertly. And that is what we need. Okay? I want to end quickly by saying, look, if you look at how traditional academia rates promotions, number of publications 56%, for instance, recommendations from outside scholars 53%, research grants 40%, reputation of presses 40%. Who actually says why those standards they use are the best? Has anybody interrogated? I have, and those standards are nothing. Even Elon Musk said that most traditional PhDs and papers published are useless, and we wrote a rejoinder agreeing with a lot of facts. You can check it in my publications, either in ResearchGate or anywhere. That's all over the place, even LinkedIn, Medium. You see me talking about that. We agree with that, and we posit solutions based on the corporate academic model that underpins reverse pedagogy and every other thing we're doing. I want to end therefore by saying that if you look at some of these things, it's academics talking to themselves. If you look at the one service within the university community, only 3%. Now, recommendation from current or former students, only 3%. Academic advisement, only. Syllabus for course is taught 1. A professor is no longer impacting the design of curricula because he's writing papers. That is criminal. Because it's the professor that will lead it, to be honest about it. So actually, professors are allowed to commit murder in traditional education in developing countries. Until this changes, nothing is going to happen in terms of development in those countries. And that is why we are working the way we're working to change the game. So many things are going wrong. The shift towards research away from teaching and service, 26%. Yeah, does it happen in the world? This is why developed countries, yes, they'll be saying research, but when you look at it actually, the researchers are actually doing real life projects in society. In Nigeria, it's not the same. In Kenya, it's not the same. In most African countries, it's not the same. And that is what we need to fix. I want to end by saying that I thank Professor Ifeyinwa Eucharia ACHUMBA for giving me the opportunity to have these conversations with her, in which I learned a lot as well. She was actually the person mentioning that reverse pedagogy is completely a new paradigm. And therefore, I'm suggesting that we shift the entire management and design of curricula and the management of learning in higher educational institutions in developing countries to the reverse pedagogy system and the corporate academic model that underpins it, where everything is scored 100 from R, I, A, and T in order to enable academics to satisfy the requirements of the Oselux vision and produce those affordances that will make the society to have the level of wealth, the level of products, services, companies, and enhancement of peace, prosperity, peace and understanding, as well as joy of individuals, countries, and organizations across academia, across industry, across public services, and wider society. Thank you very much.